The Sports Town Podcast.
Guys, it's JJ Peters. Thanks so much for listening to the Sports Town Podcast. We really appreciate it. And again, if you're listening on audio platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all that good stuff, don't forget to rate the podcast. It would be greatly appreciated. Also, if you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications, feel free to comment, and don't forget to like if you enjoy the video. Speaking of YouTube, if you are not subscribed to the Sports Town Podcast, we are doing another gift card, and the gift card will be a $20 Amazon gift card. We're halfway to 1,000 subscribers, which is our ultimate goal. Right now, I think we have 534 at the time of this recording. Might be 535. I'm not sure. Might be even lower. But lately, we've been getting a lot of subscribers. So again, I can't thank you guys enough. But again, all you have to do is be subscribed. So if you're already subscribed, you're already eligible for it. Now, if you're not, don't forget to subscribe. And once we hit that 1,000 subscribers, don't forget to DM me at sports_podcast on Twitter and screenshot for proof that you are subscribed to the Sports Down Podcast. Today on the STP pod, we have two great interviews. First, we have Vineet from the Ball Is Bae Podcast to talk about the NBA Finals, if the Bucks can come back. Now, remember, at this time of this recording, the series is 2-1 Suns. We also talk about, can the Spurs come back? He's a big Spurs fan, so we really enjoyed that topic. Can Popovich still be the coach? I forgot to mention USA Olympics just because I just totally forgot about it. And then, of course, that was a great interview. You can also find out the Ball Is Bae podcast on Instagram and Twitter at the Ball Is Bae NBA podcast. Then we have Kyle Hoffman from the Pickle podcast to talk about his reaction to UFC 264. McGregor gets knocked out by Poirier, just gets knocked out, breaks his leg. That was really disgusting. But at the end of the day, I think Poirier was the better fighter. And I think if they went longer and McGregor didn't break his leg, Poirier probably would have won. As much as I would have wanted to see McGregor win, Poirier is just so good. And right now, I think he is the best fighter in the lightweight division. You can check out the Pickle Podcast on Instagram and Facebook at the Pickle Podcast. You can also check him out wherever you get your podcasts, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Also, don't forget to rate his podcast. And then, as always, we have the Sports Lightning Round, questions from Instagram, highlight of the week, a poll question, and much more. Also, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sports_Podcast or on Twitter at SportsTownPod. Let's get the episode cooking. And now it's time for our weekly poll question. Again, you can vote on Instagram and Facebook at Sports_Podcast or on Twitter at SportsTownPod. Now, I did forget to mention this, but sorry, we did not have an episode last week just because some things didn't quite work out. And I'm in the process of moving right now, so that was why. But hopefully we'll have 2 episodes within the next week. And at the time of this recording, it was on Wednesday, July 14th. And today we actually have 2 questions as normal. And the first one is, will Conor McGregor ever get back to where he once was? Overwhelmingly, you guys said no. I totally agree. McGregor, I don't think will ever get back to what he was. He'll continue to make money. He'll probably even do some more boxing matches. But in my opinion, he won't be the same guy he was when he was the champion of the lightweight division. He's still the most polarizing fighter in UFC history, but unfortunately, I don't think he'll ever get back to what he was. And the next question was pretty simple. Suns or Bucks? I think 77% of you guys, I want to say, said the Suns. I'll disagree. I think the Bucks will end up winning this series. I originally said the Bucks in 6. If Giannis can get help, and it looks like he's at 100% or very healthy, I would, my opinion, say the Bucks in 7. So again, thanks for voting. You can vote on Instagram and Facebook at Sports_Podcast or on Twitter at SportsTownPod.
This is the highlight of the week.
And Johnson, he throws it down, and a blocking foul called on Tucker. Cameron Johnson soars and scores, and a chance for a 3-point play.
What a dunk from Cam Johnson as he slams a dunk over PJ Tucker. Despite the Suns losing 120-100 in Game 3, the Suns still currently lead the series 2-1 at the time of this recording. The veteran broadcasters Kevin Breen, Mark Jackson, and Jeff Van Gundy were on the call. What a great game, and this series is shaping up to finally be something after the Suns took the first 2 games, the Bucks took Game 3, and it's going to be interesting to what happens at the rest of this series. And now, on to our interview with the Ball Is Bae Podcast. All right, I'm pleased to be joined by Vineet of the Ball Is Bae Podcast. How's it going, Vineet?
Very good, man. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful. Had a big night last night. Of course, at the time of the recording, it's on Monday morning. Of course, what would happen in Game 3 between the Suns and Bucks, we're going to talk about. But before we get to talk about that, if you want to talk more about your podcast, how long you've been doing it. I know we kind of mentioned it a little bit before we started recording. But if you want to mention your podcast, where we can find it and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Yeah. So I am a co-host of a podcast called the Ball Is Bae Podcast. We kind of brand ourselves as the largest podcast in an Indian accent because both the hosts are from India, and we talk about the NBA. And we've been doing this for about 4 years, and we've been very lucky to have had access to a lot of NBA players that have come on our podcast. So we have had guys like Rashad Lewis, Bruce Bowen. We have had what's his name, the Run TMC guy. Robert Ory also. So we have had some NBA players come in. I had the opportunity to go to the All-Star game in 2019, which was great. And we primarily focus on NBA news reviews, kind of very similar to what you do. We do some interviews too. And we've been experimenting with some social kind of content on Instagram and Twitter this year. And it's been pretty good. So if you want to kind of check us out, I think we're at Ball Is Bae Pod on Instagram and on Twitter. It's the same thing. And if you want to, go to Apple or Google Podcast or Spotify, just search for Ball Is Bae. You should find us.
All right, thanks. That sounds awesome. That's really cool that you get to interview those type of players. I'm actually a Spurs fan, so when you just said
whoa, let's go.
Yeah, right?
Let's go.
It's kind of a tough season the last 2 years, but I feel like I think next year is going to be better. We'll see what happens in the offseason. Speaking of the Spurs, and again, before we talk about the NBA Finals, you just said you were pretty excited about the Spurs. So what do you think they need to do in this year's offseason to get back to where they were a few years ago?
I mean, I think it would be pretty amazing if we got to where we were before. I think, I've been a Spurs fan since, I think, like 2002. And so, I don't think there's going to be a run as great as that. Those 20 years was just incredible. So we've been spoiled as Spurs fans, just to have that kind of excellence year in and year out. So I don't think we're going to get there anytime soon. But the key is to tank and get a Tim Duncan. That's the strategy that has worked before. I don't know if it's going to work again, but I think getting rid of DeMar and getting rid of some of the older pieces, Patty Mills. Even though I would hate for Patty Mills to leave, but I think it's time for him to go and find something else outside because the Spurs are going nowhere, and he could probably get a better opportunity to have deep playoff runs because he's a very good role player. Kind of clear out cap space and try to get a big agent. I mean, that's probably their best bet. But nobody really wants to go play in San Antonio, which is kind of not the best thing for us. Tank and get a number one pick and then build from there. That's the strategy for small market teams.
I've heard in rumors that DeJounte Murray and Derek White could be trade pieces for a certain player. I'm not sure. I would like to keep DeJounte Murray, and I think Derek White hasn't quite reached his potential yet. But what do you think about those type? Do you think they'll be traded, and who do you think they would make a trade for if they decided to part ways with their future guards of the future?
I think that the NBA has become more of a player-driven league. We were very lucky that Tim tried to move just one time to Orlando, but and I don't necessarily think that even though we would love to have Murray and White on our rosters forever, I think White probably seems like a person that would be a little bit more loyal if the franchise does the right thing beside him. But I think that for the most part, players want to go win championships. They want to be in a winning situation. And I would be happy to let them go if they want to go to a better situation. I don't know who you're going to get. I just feel like at this point, we have to do a hard reset. since Kawhi kind of left us, we have been trying a lot of things. We have been competitive for our roster, but it's not been, first round exits are not much fun, and so they just need to hit a hard reset. Let Pop go. As much as I would hate that, but he's done his job. He looks old. He's coaching the U.S. team right now. He's had personal problems himself, so getting him to do this again and again may be too much for him. So just kind of a hard reset. Just hit that button, and start over.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I think DeMar DeRozan, who is currently our best player, I think he's not quite as much as I like DeMar DeRozan. I think he's a good
very
player.
Good. Very good.
But I don't know if he's a player that can lead you to back to what we were. I'm just not like, I just don't think he can get us back to where we were or even close to what we had. So I do think letting DeRozan go would be the smart idea. Again, I'm not a fan of tanking, but at the same time, I think if we want to get another Tim Duncan type of player, we probably will have to go that direction. Let's go to the NBA Finals now. Of course, the Bucks won Game 3, but do you still think the Suns have control of this series?
Well, technically, yes. So I generally feel that the Bucks have a better team. I think they are much more deep. They have everything that's going on for them is pretty solid. If the Bucks play a good game and the Suns play a good game, the Bucks win. So that's kind of how I look at every series. Is like, if a team plays their best and the other team plays their best, who wins? And generally that team kind of wins the series. So unless the Bucks don't show up like they did in Game 2, where Drew and Chris were absolutely terrible, I think the Bucks still have the better team. They can execute. If they execute what they executed like they executed last game, I think they should be okay.
Yeah, I originally had the Bucks winning this series in 6 games, and I think Giannis has been super impressive, but his supporting cast really hasn't been there until last night. But do you think, or how impressed with Giannis have you been after getting injured in the Hawks series, not playing for the last 2 games? People said there was a chance he could be out for a long time. But how impressed have you been with Giannis Antetokounmpo?
Absolutely a beast. I mean, he's just beasting on everybody. I think, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I sense a little Timmy in him, because he's kind of like, he does so much on the floor. Both on the defensive side as a leader, he lets people operate and have their space and their moments, which are very important in a team game. I'm super impressed by him, not just because he's putting gaudy numbers, but the way he's conducting himself as the leader of the team, where he is making sure that he's not imposing himself over Chris and Drew and giving them the space to operate, which is very important, because if they reach a place where everyone's just kind of like looking up to Giannis to win them games, then they're not going to win the series against Suns, who are just so good at executing whatever they do. Like, that's the key with the Suns, is that they are extremely good at executing, pick and roll and pick and pop, like just these like really key basketball fundamental plays. They're able to execute at a very high level. And with Giannis, I think he's figured that out, is that he can't win all these games by himself. He needs Drew and Chris to come up to a level where the whole team is winning this game. And so he has very, in a very smart way, he's getting them to kind of give them the space to operate. So I think that's the thing that I'm very impressed about, because I mean, Giannis can always drop 40 on you. Like, I don't think that's ever been a question. Like, oh, can Giannis score 40 on your team? He can. Can Giannis take 20 rebounds? Yes, he can. Like, those things are easy to do for a person of Giannis's caliber. But I think the more impressive part for me is how he's getting his team involved.
I've heard this question a lot, but why do you think we're so hard on Giannis Antetokounmpo? Because to be honest with you, I know the reason why we're hard on Ben Simmons is because he's a guard, and because he should be able to shoot a lot better than what he can. Or, we know he can't shoot, but he should be able to shoot a lot better if he's going to be a guard. But it seems like we're very critical of Giannis, how he can't shoot the 3, or he's not a good free throw shooter, but he's such a good player all around. But why do you think we're just so hard on the 2-time league MVP?
I'm not hard on Giannis, but I understand your question, which is why generally people are hard on Giannis. I think the one thing I've learned after following basketball after such a long time is that people are the majority of the loud crowd is what I call them, which is the people who are more vocal, who have an opinion about everything. They are more oriented towards style of play than impact of play. So they are more into how the player looks playing than what the person is playing as, right? So, and this is a debate I always have with everybody between Kobe and Tim, is that the difference between both of them, obviously Tim being the much better overall player, but it's just, you don't see it if you're just casually watching a game, right? You don't see what he does on the defensive side. And so you're just focused on, he doesn't have the flair or the oomph factor. And hence, people don't necessarily, so if Timmy has a bad offensive game or Giannis has a bad offensive game, that means he doesn't do well on the other side. So I feel like that's one narrative of it, which is he is not very beautiful to look at. He doesn't have the moves. He doesn't fit into, like, people love Kyrie Irving. I don't get it. I just don't get it. I mean, yes, he looks good playing basketball, which is beautiful, but I think his impact on the team is mostly negative because he doesn't defend, doesn't do anything other than score the basketball. That's one part of it. The other part of it, I think, is that Giannis does not necessarily powwow with everybody. Like, he's not, he lives in his own world. Like, he's busy having fun with his brothers and his wife and having smoothies, and he's doing his thing. He's not, doing what LeBron does or Chris Paul. Like, he's not chummies with everybody. So no one really has that kind of attachment to him as much, because he's also not American. So he doesn't really have that camaraderie, I think. And which is why, people in the media don't necessarily kind of have that, love for him as they would have for the other players. Was that your question, or do you think that it was mostly to do with impact on game?
You pretty much answered my question. I just had heard so much about Giannis. We always critical, he can't shoot a three-pointer, he can't shoot a free throw. Or, like I said, he's not very flashy when he plays, but he gets the job done. I mean, he has a decent amount of triple doubles. Like, he's a 2-time league MVP. I think he's somewhat fun to watch just because he dominates when he's on. But yeah, you answered my question, what I was looking for. So, speaking of the Bucks, do you think there's a good chance they win the next 3 games? Because I originally had the Bucks in 6, but do you think the Bucks have a good chance of winning the next 3 games?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if the Bucks just play average basketball that they're capable of, where everybody chips in, I think they are a problem for the Suns, because the Suns have to be at 90% to defeat the Bucks, and the Bucks have to be at like 80% to defeat the Suns. So if everybody shows up even to an average level, I think the Suns definitely are probably going to lose the series. But it all depends on Chris and Drew. I don't think that's it kind of sucks, because I wish they had that help. I wish Giannis had that help of a consistent 2 who came in and delivered every time, especially in big moments, which he doesn't have. I think, I don't know if they'll get the next 3 games, but I definitely think that they should win the series.
Yeah, and speaking of the Suns, do you think Monte Williams made the right choice of resting Devin Booker at the end? I think there was still somewhat of a competitive game, and then he started resting Devin Booker. Do you think that was a smart move?
I mean, they had lost the game, I think, for the most part, and well, not really, but I just felt, I don't think it's necessarily a smart move, but I'm totally fine with it. I think sometimes coaches want to see how different lineups work, and if they feel like, okay, this is not the game we're going to win, let's just get our star player out and let's try a different lineup and see if there is an impact with this lineup. I mean, a lot of coaches do that when they feel that the game is lost.
Yeah, and I think it was I don't know if it was a smart move, but at the same time, I understand what they were doing, because, I mean, the game was somewhat still close, but I think the Bucks had ultimately won the game. They had controlled the game for most of the series, except for a little part in the second quarter there. But this, if we continue talking about the Suns, DeAndre Ayton in his first postseason has been very impressive.
Very impressive.
How impressed with the 22-year-old have you been?
Very impressive. I mean, he's done a great job. I mean, I think a lot of that credit goes to Chris Paul because I don't know if you remember Lob City, but DeAndre Jordan looked like amazing when he was playing next to Chris Paul. Like, he just looked like a different player. And once you took Chris Paul out, DeAndre Jordan kind of fell off the face of earth, right? There was this huge, like, he was like a big free agent signing at some point of time. Like, he was that impressive. So as much as I'm impressed with DeAndre Ayton, I think that, like, I would say a huge part of the credit goes to Chris Paul and how Chris Paul uses him in the pick and roll and how he finds him. And I think there is a kind of trust factor where DeAndre knows that eventually he's going to get a couple of touches, which is all he needs. He doesn't want to be frustrated and keep demanding the ball, because as big men, you need somebody to feed them the ball. And if no one's feeding them the ball, then they're going to get frustrated. And he's a number one pick, so
Yeah, I think DeAndre Ayton the last few years had been kind of judged unfairly because, as I've been mentioned the last few weeks, we always thought he would be, because of course in his draft class you had Luka Doncic, you had Trae Young. I think we always kind of judge him unfairly just because he's not those players. But I think this postseason he's finally showed to people that he was worth the number one overall pick. And of course, to be fair to the Suns, at the time DeAndre Ayton was the best overall prospect. But I understand, Ayton has finally, I think, proved to people he can be, or he was a good number one pick. And I think in the future he could be a top 5 or a top 3 in elite center. But speaking of Chris Paul, do you think if the Suns do win the finals, do you think he'll be named the MVP?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I don't see anyone else. I mean, who else would you think? I mean, Booker's not played well. I think maybe last game he played okay. Maybe DeAndre Ayton if he's so crucial in the win, but I think CP3 is probably going to win it. I don't see anyone else.
Yeah, I think it's just either him or Booker. I mean, yeah, Booker hasn't been super impressive, but I would not be surprised if he got the MVP. But I think if the Bucks on the other side end up winning, I think it's going to be Giannis. We all know that. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I do kind of want to talk more about this. Do you think right now Chris Paul is a top 5 point guard in the league?
In the league? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right, let's see. Got Steph, point guard, right? Yeah. Got Steph, Dame. Who else you got? Yeah, Steph, Dame, Chris, CP3.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many good point guards in the league. Of course, there's Damian Lillard, Steph Curry. You can kind of, I mean, Luka is more considered a point guard than a shooting guard. And then you guys got like Kyrie Irving.
Isn't Luka like a point forward? Just because of his size, or you still consider him point guard? I mean, yeah, I think he was in the guard section for the All-Star, right?
Yeah, I would consider him more of a point guard because he handles the ball a lot.
Right.
The majority of the time. And I think when he came into the league, I think he was considered a shooting guard, but he is 6'6", so he's got that size of a shooting guard. But again, he's got the handles and he handles the ball a lot, and I would consider him more of a point guard. But and of course, as we go back to Game 3. The Suns did not ultimately play well. The Bucks were very impressive. What do you think was the big reason why the Suns couldn't take Game 3, and why do you think the Bucks dominated so much in the last game?
Why? I really, we do this live every day on Instagram right after the game. I don't know what time it is Eastern Standard Time, but it is 10:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time. So I don't know what time it's in the US, but and I was trying really hard to come up with a reason as to what really happened in the game, but I didn't really see anything other than, the Bucks played pretty much the same kind of game that they played last time, except for maybe Jrue Holiday shot better. What happened in Game 2 was that Suns got really lucky, and they got some really difficult shots up at the right moment. They were getting some very tough shots in, and that did not happen this time. So I don't necessarily think there was anything that was different from the last game, other than the fact that the Suns were able to put down shots that were difficult, and they couldn't do it this time.
Yeah, I would agree with you as well. And again, I think, like I said, the Bucks are the better team overall, but I think the Suns, mean, game one, they dominated. Game two is a little different. Of course, in game three, the Bucks finally came up to play. I think the Bucks were a little desperate too, of course. They were a lot more aggressive. But before we end the interview, who do you like ultimately at the end of the season? I think you said you mentioned a little bit the Bucks, but who do you think will end up pulling out in the finals this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bucks are going to pull it off. I think that they have the best player in the series. They have the best team in the series. It's just a matter of them kind of just executing at an average level. And, if you had to roll the dice, you would roll your dice on that. But on the other hand, I would be very happy for CP3 if he wins. So this is one of those finals where I'm happy if either team wins.
And again, thanks for coming on. It's been a great talk, especially about the finals. But before we end the interview, do you have anything else you want to talk more about your podcast, what you have in store, all that good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if people want to follow us, they can go find us on Ball Is Bae Podcast. And really, thanks for inviting me on the podcast. I think that it's great to talk to a Spurs fan. I mean, I didn't. How did you become a Spurs fan? Let's talk Spurs for 5 minutes before we go. What was your Spurs? What's your Spurs induction story?
So the reason why I became a Spurs fan is because the first ever NBA game I watched, if I can remember right, it was the Spurs. I don't know if they were taking on the Cavs or someone else, but it was the first time I ever watched an NBA game. And I think it was Tim Duncan was the first guy I ever really saw, and just became a Spurs fan. And I think it was in the finals in 2007. But again, my family wasn't really a huge NBA family, but that's when I kind of became a fan. And of course, after Tim Duncan started getting a little older, I became a huge Kawhi Leonard fan. And I understand, the way things ended were not great, but I'm still loyal to Kawhi. But just first time I ever watched, they were the first team I ever really watched, and I just kind of fell in love with the Spurs. And yeah, that's pretty much my story. It's not a bad
story. That's a good. I mean, I'm always interested in learning, because I'm from India and we don't necessarily have a team to support. We just have to pick the team in the US. We're not regionally focused. So it's always interesting for me to know how people find teams to support. And obviously, literally 1 out of every 3 NBA fan is a Lakers fan. So I'm always surprised and happy to find people who are not a Lakers fan and who are not from that place of origin. So I was just curious about that story. And also the other question we ask all our guests, and you're not a guest on the podcast, but we would love to have you, is who do you think had a better career, Tim Duncan or Kobe Bryant?
Oh, Tim Duncan. I mean, I understand I might be a little biased towards that, but
But if you had to even take away your bias, let's say you take away your bias and say, okay, if I had to be purely analytical, how would you keep both the careers? Where do you think one is better and one is, how would you weigh it?
Well, I mean, if you look at both careers, Tim Duncan and Kobe, and both were legends. Both I think Duncan's top 5, Kobe's somewhere in the top 10 there. But if you look, Kobe went to more finals, but they both won 5. Tim Duncan has 2 league MVPs. Kobe only has 1. I think, if I can remember, Duncan went to 14 All-Star games. I think Kobe went to more, but I think that was because of fans, because the fans were more like Kobe just because he was flashy. But if you look at I think Duncan has more All-NBA first-team selections, and Duncan did go to more playoffs. I don't think Duncan ever missed the playoffs.
No, never missed the playoffs, yeah.
The last few years, Kobe didn't. I think Kobe, toward the end of his career, Kobe was more, I think, selfish a little more in his career than Duncan was. And Duncan even took many pay cuts, and Kobe did not. And then, of course, at the end, Kobe became less selfish and was more team driven. But if you look at the way their careers played, Duncan, never missed a playoff series. Always, in my opinion, took pay cuts to make the team better. Kobe never did that. So, and again, more league MVPs, more finals MVPs for Duncan. I just think Duncan at the end just had more awards and better stats. And again, he was more consistent than Kobe was. So,
There you go. All right, man. On that good note, on that homage to the great man.
Right.
Did you know that there's actually an Instagram account for Tim Duncan?
I did not know. Like, it's his own personal account.
It's a very interesting account. I'll tell you what it is. It's an account of Tim Duncan and his friend, and they are like it's called Squatch and Cox. It's really, I mean, I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of like, oh, you can't because I had this thing on. But it's basically Tim and his friend, and they like go fishing, and it's just Squatch and Cox. I think like Squatch is probably Tim and Cox is the other guy, and they're like, going hunting, playing paintball. It's so weird to see that Instagram account of Timmy, but it's the only Instagram account where he has some public photos of him as a human being.
Yeah, I've actually never heard that, but I should definitely go give that a follow for both my podcast account and my personal account. So, again, thanks for coming on, Vineet.
Man.
Yeah, it was been great. It's great, especially that you're a Spurs fan. I'm a Spurs fan, so that's a great talk. So
that's a good one, man. That's a good one, yeah.
All right, thanks for coming on, Vineet, and have a wonderful day.
All right, dude, take care. Bye-bye.
The STP Sports Lightning Round. Your biggest sports stories in the world this past week.
The Pelicans have found their next head coach. The Pelicans are reportedly close to hiring Pelicans assistant Willie Green. The news was first reported by ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski. Green spent the last few years as an assistant with the Golden State Warriors and the Phoenix Suns. Green also played in the NBA 12 years. Willie Green addressed why he's perfect for the New Orleans Pelicans head coaching job. It's doing everything from a place of love, he continued, and if I can develop a relationship with players, coaches, our front office, and I can be critical, but out of love, they can receive it better. It's not how well I drop a play or how much I can get on you or discipline you. It's how much people feel that you love them and care about them. He will be the third Pelicans head coach in just 3 years. Last month, the Pelicans fired Stan Van Gundy after just one season. New Orleans finished last season with an abysmal 31-41 record. The Pelicans were also disappointing on the defensive side of the ball last season, ranked 23rd in 100 possessions. The new Pelicans head coach is only 40 years old and is the third youngest coach in the NBA currently, only behind Oklahoma City Thunder head coach Mike Denault, who is 35, and Memphis Grizzlies coach Taylor Jenkins, who is 36. The Washington football team will reportedly have a new nickname in 2022. Washington changed its name from Redskins to the football team last July after many Native Americans protested against the nickname and stated it should be changed immediately. Back in 2013, owner Dan Snyder said he would never change the name. After they retired the Redskins mascot, they decided to go with the football team temporarily. The franchise asked fans what they wanted the new nickname to be and had many submissions. According to the report, the Warriors' name was on there. Even though it sounds alright, WFT President Jason Wright stated about the potential Warriors mascot. One might look at this name as natural and even harmless transition, considering that it does not necessarily or specifically carry a negative connection. But as we learned through our research and engagement with various groups, context matters, and that makes it a slippery slope. He was also sorry for all the fans who thought the name of the Redskins was offensive. He also thanked all the Native Americans for engaging with them on how to be kind to every race. Many submissions were sent that included the Red Wolves, Red Hogs, Red Tails, Pilots, Senators, Generals, and the Washington football team. They also had the Washington, D.C. and the Washington Football Club, among many others. The franchise is very confident they will have a nickname by early 22 in that time for the upcoming season. The team also plans on keeping their current colors of burgundy and gold. McLaurin driver and rising superstar in F1, Lando Norris had his watch stolen and was mugged at Wembley Stadium on Sunday, January 11th. The 21-year-old driver was at the Euro Cup final and posted a picture of him at the game on Saturday. The picture also showed that he was wearing his watch before it was stolen. According to reports, the watch is worth over $100,000 and had the custom colors of Team McLaurin, blue and orange. On Sunday, Norris posted a picture of himself on his Instagram account saying, "Congrats on the win, Italy. You did us proud, England." After the report had been announced, McLaurin released a statement saying, "Thankfully, Lando was unharmed, but he is understandably shaken. They continued with the statement, "The team is supporting Lando, and we are sure that many racing fans will join us in wishing him all the best for the British Grand Prix this weekend. And this is now a police matter. We cannot comment further." Norris is having an immense season and is currently in 4th place in the standing. He is also the only driver in F1 this season to score points in every race. His next race will be this Sunday when he heads to the hometown of Silverstone. His career best at Silverstone was 5th, and he will look to get a better place finish than 5th. Denver Broncos legend assistant coach Alex Gibbs has passed away. He was 80. The news was first reported by the Denver Broncos organization. According to multiple reports, he died of a stroke. Gibbs became famous for creating blocking zones and was the first O-line coach to go small and rely on small and athletic offensive linemen. He was a big reason why the Broncos won back-to-back titles in the late 90s. Gibbs first arrived in Denver in 85, where he was hired by Dan Reeves to protect young quarterback John Elway. Elway had been sacked 55 times the season before, and it dropped down to just 26. The late great Gibbs was in Denver for 3 different stints and was most successful or most impactful in the second. He was also a huge help to Hall of Famer running back Terrell Davis. Davis rushed for 157 yards and 3 touchdowns in the victory versus the Packers in Super Bowl 32. Davis was also the league's MVP the next year as he rushed for 2,008 yards and 21 touchdowns. Gibbs also spent time with the Chiefs, Texans, Chargers, Raiders, and Colts. He was hired by the Seahawks in 2010 but retired before the first game of the season. The Broncos released a statement on behalf of the Alex Gibbs family, saying, "We are deeply saddened by the passing of Alex Gibbs, who had a profound impact on the Denver Broncos and the National Football League as an offensive line coach. Our hearts go out to Alex's wife, Trina, and the entire Gibbs family, as well as Alex's many former players and fellow coaches. He will be greatly missed by Broncos fans and many around the NFL." One of the greatest to ever play the sport of tennis will not participate at this year's Olympics. The 20-time Grand Slam winner, Roger Federer, has decided to forego this summer's games in Tokyo. It's been reported it's mostly because of his knee. The Swiss tennis player released a statement on social media saying, "I unfortunately experienced a setback with my knee, and I've accepted that I must withdraw from the Tokyo Olympic Games. I am greatly disappointed. It's been an honor and a highlight of my career each time I have represented Switzerland. I have already begun rehabilitation in the hopes of returning to the tour later this summer." Federer is currently ranked 8th in the world. He has won a gold medal in doubles back in 2008 and received a silver medal in 2012 when he lost to Andy Murray in the final. The knee injury has been tough for the 8-time Wimbledon champion. Since 2019, he has only played 19 matches. He withdrew in the French Open after just 3 rounds and lost the quarterfinals at Wimbledon this year. Fans hope that Federer gets better soon, and the sport is definitely not the same without him. Federer now joins Rafael Nadal, Serena Williams, Dominic Thiem, and others to not play this year. The number 1 tennis player in the world, Novak Djokovic, is also still undecided whether he'll play in this year's Olympics. The unpopular 7-inning doubleheader rule and runner on second and extra innings could be abolished after the 2021 season. According to MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred, much less likely to be a part of our permanent landscape. Many fans did not like the ruling, and many relievers blew saves even though they did not allow the runner on second base. The MLB decided it was a good idea during the pandemic, and now things can go back to normal, similar to what it was like during the pre-pandemic. Manfred also stated, "These were COVID-related changes. I don't think 7-inning doubleheaders are going to be part of our future going forward." However, Manfred is very confident that the universal DH could be in effect after this season. The MLB collective bargaining agreement ends on December 1st of 2021, so there is a chance that there could be a work stoppage similar to the 94/95 season. Although Manfred is hopeful that that will not happen and both sides will come to an agreement before next season begins. Also in baseball news, the A's and the league are very serious about moving out of Oakland. According to multiple sources, the league thinks Las Vegas would be the most ideal situation. The A's are currently in Ring Central Coliseum until 2024, and it seems the city of Oakland will not pay for a much-needed new stadium. Free agent defensive back Richard Sherman has been arrested for burglary, domestic violence, and is currently sitting behind bars. At 6:08 a.m. on Wednesday, July 14th, he was placed at the King County Correctional Facility in Washington. According to reports, he was denied bail. They were also investigating the former Super Bowl champ for a possible hit and run and maybe a DUI. Sherman then ran from the cops and crashed his car on the highway at 1 a.m. Pacific time. There was also reports that Sherman was being chased by police, and the former Seahawks and 49er tried to break into someone's home somewhere in Redmond, Washington. After Sherman was arrested, he was taken to the hospital for possible injuries and then placed in jail. Before all this happened, Sherman was looking to sign with the team this season and was possibly considering returning to the Seahawks. The 5-time Pro Bowler stated about the possible return to the Seahawks. "It's always in the cards. I spent my entire offseason in Seattle. It's where I live. It's where my family is. So it's never out of the cards, and I have a conversation throughout the offseason. Everything needs to shake out right. They're still figuring things out. I'm still figuring things out, but it's definitely not out of the cards." There have also been rumors of the Dallas Cowboys looking into signing Sherman. One of the biggest stars in professional soccer is staying put. Messi has agreed to re-sign with Barcelona. The 10-time La Liga champion will re-sign a new deal that is worth $594 million over the next 5 years. However, it's a massive pay cut. Messi's contract is not finalized, but it's very close to getting done. He is currently on vacation and will later join Barcelona before the season starts on August 15th. The new deal would shock some fans, thinking that he would not re-sign with Barcelona for this upcoming season. After last season ended, Messi wanted to leave Barcelona and reportedly either join Manchester City or PSG. But Messi had a great relationship with the new president of Barcelona and decided to stay with the club. On the other side, Barcelona will need to get out of debt before they can officially sign Messi. They are currently over $1 billion in debt. The president of the La Liga stated Barcelona will need to get rid of their debt before the season begins in August. The club is expected to get rid of their debt sometime later this month. The 34-year-old has scored over 600 goals and helped Barcelona stay relevant these past 20 years. Bad news for Clipper fans. 2-time Finals MVP Kawhi Leonard will miss some time next season. Leonard had surgery on his knee on Tuesday, and according to Sean Schroeder of the Athletic Stadium, there's no timetable for his return. The 5-time All-Star injured his knee in Game 4 of the Western Conference semifinals in a win versus the Jazz. Kawhi is now 30 years old and could be a free agent this offseason. Back in 2019, the former Spur and Raptor signed a 3-year, $102 million contract that had an opt-out clause in his final season. According to multiple reports, he is most likely going to opt out of his contract so he can sign a supermax this offseason. This season, Leonard is averaging 24.8 points per game, 6.5 rebounds per game, and 5.2 assists per game. Even though people are skeptical that Leonard will get a massive deal this offseason, both Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant tore their ACL and still got the supermax that offseason. There also have been multiple reports that say the Dallas Mavericks and Miami Heat will try to make a hard push for the Clippers superstar. The Knicks are also in contention for the Leonard sweepstakes. It will be a wild offseason this summer. And now, on to our interview with the Pickle Podcast. Alrighty, I am pleased to be joined by Kyle Hoffman, the host of the Pickle Podcast. How's it going, Kyle?
Going good, JJ. I can't wait to talk about the exciting fights that last weekend.
Yeah, I mean, of course, McGregor and Poirier was the main draw, but I mean, you had some other fights that included Gilbert Burns and Stephen Thompson, the co-main event. Of course, the Sean O'Malley fight was big. What was your favorite fight of the night?
I actually really liked the Aldana versus Kanitskia fight. I felt they were pretty evenly matched. A lot of people had Kanitskia favored because she has made a lot of improvements over her last couple fights and went on a streak. However, Aldana sort of took over at the end with her veteran boxing skills. And I just felt that it was a really great fight. I feel like both fighters got to showcase their skills. And kudos to Kanitskia for landing so many good blows on Aldana. However, the veteran in the end took the decision, or not. She didn't take the decision. She actually finished Kanitskia with some brutal ground and pound. So that was really surprising to me to see a fight like that end that way. I thought it would probably go to decision, but that to me was the surprise of the night for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't really know much about those fighters, to be honest, but it was interesting to see that fight go down and the way it ended. And it was still even though it ended up in a knockout or a knockdown or a knockout, it was still a fun fight to watch. If we go to the co-main event, Stephen Thompson fought very hard, I thought, until the end, and of course Gilbert Burns just went out of right at the end. Were you impressed by how good Stephen Thompson was against the number 2 challenger in the welterweight division?
It's sort of what I expected, to be honest. And JJ, you know that I made some bets prior to these fights, and I ended up winning some money off of it because a lot of people had Stephen Thompson winning that fight. However, I know that Gilbert Burns is great at closing the distance on fighters, and that's just exactly what he did against Thompson. I happen to have noticed that I think Thompson maybe was looking a little different than he usually does after his weight cut. I noticed he looks, the physicality was a little different to me. I think he's just maybe getting up there in age, but a lot of people will make fun of me for saying that, but that's kind of how I analyze fights. I do think that Stephen Thompson did have a chance to win in that fight, a great chance, but I think that Gilbert Burns came out with a solid game plan against what he was going to do and was able to take care of that karate stance that Stephen Thompson throws at people, and he was able to capitalize on closing the gap and eventually got him to the ground a couple times, and I believe that's what won the fight for Burns, is taking him to the ground. Otherwise, it would have been a Thompson fight.
To be honest with you, with the way the McGregor and Poirier fight ended, I would probably say that was the best fight of the night, and I think all the other ones were knockouts, right? So, or submissions or something. So I would probably say that was the best fight. Let's see here. Speaking of the welterweight division, Gilbert Burns is the number 2 challenger. He already fought Usman once. Who is Usman's next challenger? Would it be a guy like Colby Covington, or would it be someone outside the top 3?
Well, I'd like to see Leon Edwards face Usman. Just I think that Leon Edwards would be able to do a little bit better than other people have in the past. I would like to see the Colby Covington fight again too. But there's that division is really stacked, and Usman's really kind of holding up that division. At number 5, you have Michael Chiesa, Vicente Luque. Vicente Luque, I think, could possibly have a chance against Usman if he has his striking in order. But there's really no one that can compare against the champ right now as far as a all-around, well-rounded fighter like Usman. So it's up in the air for Dana White to make a decision at this point who he wants Usman to face. I know that he's going to be forced to give Usman a top contender. So we'll see what happens here. Maybe there'll be some shuffles in divisions. Maybe we'll see somebody come up and, challenge for something that surprises us. Who knows? But I'm excited to see who he faces next.
Is there a chance that Usman would go up a division, or is he just going to stay in the welterweight division, at least for now?
I think he's going to hang around for now. He could very well go up in weight class. However, when you go up in weight class, the wrestling doesn't matter as much, and he's going to have to improve his striking a little bit more to go up in that division too. Not that he's not a great striker, but you got to be focused more on striking in that weight class, especially being an undersized person if he was to go up in weight.
Yeah, and it's going to be, to be honest with you, I'm excited either way. I know Usman is one of the best fighters in the UFC. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I guess there's a chance of him fighting Jake Paul, but we'll see what happens there. If we go now to the McGregor and Poirier fight, I was expecting Poirier to get the win and to get a knockout. Technically, he got the knockout, but a lot of people would say, well, McGregor broke his leg. But to be honest with you, Poirier had that fight with the first few minutes, I felt McGregor was doing well, and then after a while, Poirier started dominating. Do you think if McGregor doesn't break his leg, Poirier gets a knockout in the second round again?
I'm not so sure. I just think that, when you look at the stats, JJ, Poirier landed in that fight about 5.6 significant strikes per minute compared to McGregor's 5.3. So it wasn't that different of a margin as far as who was getting the significant strikes. Now, it could be the judges in McGregor's favor, or you know what I'm saying? You know how the UFC is. But, I really think that if he had not broken his leg, they possibly could have made it into the next round, and, McGregor could have had a chance, but we'll never know. When something like that happens in the fight, all you can do is really feel bad for that fighter, because they'll never know what would have happened if they wouldn't have got injured, and McGregor will constantly question if he would have came out of that fight on top, or if he would have gone down and actually got KO'd by Dustin. Worst case scenario is Conor McGregor gets knocked out again. So I think Conor lucked out in this regard, but not as far as his ankle, though. We're just lucky that he didn't have any nerve damage. It looks like he was moving his toes afterward. So, one thing I noticed was that Charles Oliveira came out and said that we should be giving McGregor a round of applause. Now, we all know what McGregor said after the fight about Dustin's wife, and that was kind of frowned upon. But at the same time, McGregor having all that money that he does, he didn't have to go out and fight Poirier for a third time. In fact, I think he knew coming into that fight that he was going to be outmatched just a little bit, and McGregor's confidence always carries him into victory. But I think this time around, Poirier was ready. He knew the game plan, and I don't think Conor was able to adjust from the previous fight as much as he should have, being that he was too used to boxing and that he was really trying to be a boxer last fight. So this time around, Conor did what he was supposed to do. I even said to you, I think, and some of my other friends, that Conor's going to come out painting that octagon like a paintbrush with his kicks, and he surely did that. He was giving Poirier a little bit of trouble in the first couple, 30 seconds of the first round, but after that, Poirier made his adjustments and was able to start landing counters at the same time as Conor was going in. So the great thing that people have not been talking about in this fight is that Poirier was able to telegraph McGregor's timing, which nobody has been able to do that other than maybe a Chad Mendes in the second round. So Dustin Poirier is going to be a dangerous opponent for whoever he's facing, and I even have him winning Oliveira matchup right now.
Speaking of Dustin Poirier and Charles Oliveira, do you think that's the next matchup, or do you think that's Poirier's next fight? Because I think he is the best fighter in that division.
I think at this point it has to happen. If you beat Conor McGregor twice, no matter the timeline, I think you deserve a shot at an elite champion like Oliveira. And to be honest, I think if you even ask Dana White or most fight analysts, they would probably favor Poirier in that fight. Now, I'm saying that's not what Dana White wants, but I think Dana White knows that if we set up that fight, that would be a huge pay-per-view event. So expect a huge card if they put that card together, because that's going to be a huge fight, and there's going to be a lot of good fights associated with that card.
And as we see McGregor, it seems like McGregor is starting to cool down. He seems like he won't ever be the same type of fighter he once was. Do you think McGregor will ever be the same, or even close to being the same as he was just a few years ago?
Well, I'm going to kind of go on a limb here and make a bold statement. One of the comments that Conor made in the octagon after the fight was over was that it's a savage business, right? I'm not sure that's the exact words, but you could tell that Conor McGregor was sort of feeling different about the world of fighting after that injury. I've broken my leg in a similar fashion, and it really gives you the heebie-jeebies when you think about if that could happen again. And leg kicks are part of the game, so I think McGregor's going to be hesitant to come back to the octagon. I think he's probably would try boxing again if he tried. But it's just sad to me that Conor McGregor couldn't pull his ego aside and put in the real training and change his mindset. I think he kept the wrong mindset during that weeks prior to the fight, even though he was training properly. I think his mindset is what lost him this fight.
Yeah, and I think McGregor looked a lot better than in January, but it seemed like, because the first 30 seconds to a minute, I felt like he had control of the fight, and then he went to I think it was Daniel Cormier. I think he pointed something out where McGregor looked really good the first few 30 seconds or a minute, and then he tried a submission basically, and that's not McGregor. McGregor's more of a guy that would knock someone out instead of going down on the ground. But are you going to add anything to that?
Well, I was just going to say, the reason why McGregor attempted that is because he wasn't able to keep Dustin off of him, and he was in I think at that point he was trying to get into full guard, and Conor just wanted to give him the headlock in order to stop him from going to half guard or full guard. So I think that was more of a defense mechanism on Conor's part, so I'll give him credit for attempting that. I think it stopped Justin from doing what he wanted to do for just long enough to get through that.
Okay, because it seems like, McGregor's more of a guy that will knock someone out instead of going on the ground. But I guess you have to give a lot of credit to Dustin Poirier for doing that, because he found the weakness of McGregor. Mm-hmm. Let's step off the McGregor and Poirier fight for just a little bit. Let's start off with the first fight, Sean O'Malley versus, I can't remember his name now, but the guy, was it 10 or 11 days, or basically took the fight within 10 days before the event happened.
Yeah, Chris Matino.
How impressed were you with the way he came out? And like I said, he lasted 3 rounds, and it was not very long before the round was over until they considered it a knockout. But how impressed were you with how he handled it?
extremely impressed. The last time I've seen that was a police dash cam of somebody who was getting tasered and wouldn't go down. So, I mean, just the essence of the way that he fought that fight was straightforward. He was chasing O'Malley down the whole time, and you could tell in the later rounds that Sean O'Malley was getting a little bit tired, and he knew that he had to come out with a lot of jabs and a lot of defensive kicks and a lot of defensive punches to just keep Moutinho off of him. So I think Sean O'Malley has grown a lot in that regard. I think in some of his previous fights, he's engaged closer. He was having to run in this fight a little bit, but at the same time, he didn't do what fighters normally do and try to just avoid contact. He welcomed the contact, but he was long enough, and his reach was long enough, and his speed was fast enough to make some strikes and get out of Moutinho's way just in time. Moutinho came very close to connecting very well to Sean O'Malley up against the cage, but Sean O'Malley's Muhammad Ali skills on the cage were impressive. I really have to admit that his defensive skills in this fight really impressed me, and I think that Sean O'Malley has taken more of a defensive approach to his game going forward, especially when met with an opponent who's a bull rusher like Moutinho. I'm really excited to see Moutinho's next opponent. I really hope that they're tough enough to face him, because if not, I think he's going to be a knockout monster in the UFC if they start giving him opponents that match up well with him.
It seems like Sean O'Malley is going to be, this last year or two, he's been, the way he's fought, I think he's had, 2 or 3 knockouts, maybe even more, if I can't quite remember right now. But what do you think about his future? Because it seems like he's going to be continued to go on the rise and maybe even compete for a championship or compete for a belt. But what do you think about O'Malley's future going forward?
I think he's reached a level of maturity in his career so far at this point recently to chase a championship belt. I think beforehand he was a little immature in his fighting. So I think his fighting style has gotten more mature. He hasn't really changed much up, but he's become more defensive, like I said. So if he keeps on this path and his coaches keep coaching him up to face people like Moutinho, I don't know who they're going to throw at him, because if they throw a prototype of O'Malley in there, O'Malley's beating that guy. But if they throw a brawler in there, O'Malley's going to be ready. So I can see him making a run. I know that he's probably going to have to be faced with a tough opponent coming up too, especially after. To be completely honest, he dominated Moutinho. So and Moutinho is a beast, and I actually think he would. I think he would beat a lot of contenders in that division. So we'll see what happens for Sean O'Malley, but the future is only bright in my eyes.
Yeah, the last 3 fights that he's had came by knockout, I think, if I can remember right. O'Malley seems like he's only going to get better and maybe even be the future of the sport.
Yeah.
Maybe in a few years, maybe even less than that. Let's
Absolutely.
go on to the Greg Hardy fight. What happened to him? Because it seemed like he almost had the knockout, and then all of a sudden, like a second later, he was knocked out.
I've been waiting.
What did you think about that?
I've been waiting to talk about this because I've analyzed the footage over and over again, and here's what I think happened. I think that Greg Hardy went in for the right hook, and he connected with Tayavusa. But at the same time, I think Tayavusa just completely fell off balance a little bit, and I think he played it off a little bit as if he was hurt. You know how fighters will sink their knees and kind of wobble their chin? I think there was half that he was shook, and I think the other half was that he recovered extremely quickly but still put on the show. And I think that was kind of his plan. I mean, fighters have been doing that more often, but he definitely lured Hardy in with that because he looked more hurt than he was, in my opinion, and he was ready for that 1-2 when Hardy came in, and he connected right in the eye. Greg Hardy, being the tough guy that he is, and all the UFC fighters being as tough as they are, a shot to the eye from Tayavusa while you're coming in forward is enough to drop any fighter to their knees. So I had my money on Tayavusa for that reason alone, because I think Greg Hardy's fight IQ just isn't where it needs to be to face someone who's an elite striker like that.
So Tayavusa, after the fight, he will drink out of his shoe. Can you explain more of that? Because to be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot about that.
Yes.
I'm assuming the people that are listening don't know a whole lot, or some of them don't know know much about.
Well, in Australia and New Zealand, they have a custom called doing a shoey, right? It's an act of brotherly love. You do a shoey together, you drink out of a shoe. It's sort of a rite of passage as far as partying goes in those countries. So, or in those cities as well. So that's why he does it, and it gets more entertaining every time. I mean, he actually took a shoey out of a shoe. I think it was a rare Air Force One or something like that. That was probably already worth $4,000, and that puppy is probably worth about $14,000 now. So I'm excited to see more shoey action from that guy. It's super fun to watch.
Yeah, because it was really strange. Like, I saw that he had done it a few times, but after the fight, he did it. And I think I was watching with my brother at the time, and he was just like so confused. So it was kind of funny how that played out. But
I want to see Joe Rogan do a shoey. He hasn't done one yet. I challenge you, Joe Rogan. If you're watching this on JJ's podcast, you need to do a shoey, or else you're not proven in the UFC community.
Yeah, that would definitely be interesting if Joe Rogan would do that.
I bet you he would do it if Ty was on the podcast. We'll have to see that. I bet that'll happen soon.
Yeah, I'm down. I'll definitely watch that. Let's go back to the McGregor and Poirier fight. So it seems like I said, Poirier's gonna end up fighting Oliveira. But what about McGregor? Does he fight a guy like Gaethje, or does he just, because I think he's got one more fight before he's a free agent, and I'm assuming he'll at least do one more boxing match. But do you think a guy like Gaethje would be a next opponent, or maybe Ferguson, or, I mean, what do you think? Well,
it's going to be a while before McGregor comes back. Those type of injuries last 6 to 8 months to recover, and then you have to recover physically and get back in top shape, and even, the mental stress of that, is going to take its toll on him, and kind of get him out of his motion, so to speak. So it's going to take a while for McGregor to come back. Don't expect him for another year. He's going to have to face a lower level opponent when he comes back. And one thing I did just notice is that Islam Makhachev is ranked number 9 in the world right now. And we failed to mention this, JJ, but I could possibly see a Makhachev-Poirier fight coming up soon, depending on how the Oliveira situation pans out. I forget who Makhachev fights next. I do have the card up here.
He fights this week, doesn't he?
Yeah, he fights this week versus Moises. So depending on how he does in that fight, if he beats Moises, I see Makhachev jumping the rankings. And, by the time McGregor is back, that could be a worthy opponent for him. He'd be like another Khabib. He could have his chance to get revenge against one of Khabib's homies, so to speak. So that could happen. But I really do think that he's going to have to face a lower level opponent before facing someone like Makhachev. I could even see maybe like a Kevin Lee he could fight. He could even drop down a weight class and fight someone there. So it's really open for McGregor. It's pretty much whoever he wants to fight outside of the top 5 at this point. Anything inside the top 5, I don't think he's going to get when he comes back, unless it's, one of those freaky fights where they face someone like who's a veteran or something. But we'll see. It's hard to tell with McGregor.
You just mentioned Makhachev, and it seems like I said, he's ranked number 9. And I think Joe Rogan was saying this on Saturday. He should be ranked higher if so many people weren't ducking him. If he gets a win this week, which of course at the time of this recording was Wednesday night, do you think he would fight someone in the top 5, or maybe like a Tony Ferguson, who I think is ranked 6th, and maybe I guess a Dan Hooker too, who's ranked I think 7th?
I think that maybe Tony Ferguson could be a worthy opponent. I also think a Dan Hooker fight could be in the mix for him. I don't see a Rafael Dos Anjos fight. I'm just waiting for him to lose. I know he's coming back strong, but he's going to be faced with another opponent, and we'll see his performance in that. But yeah, Dan Hooker or Tony Ferguson would be a good one. Justin Gaethje would be a good one. What would be even better, JJ, would be a Dariush versus Makhachev fight. I think that would be one of the most exciting fights, just being that the strength and poise that Dariush has showed this year. I think that would be a really exciting fight for 2 up-and-comers.
And I keep on mentioning this a lot, but it seems like Justin Gaethje right now is kind of getting screwed over. He hasn't fought since, October, and he got subbed by Khabib. Do you think, and we've heard a lot about this with Michael Chandler being his next opponent, but Chandler wants to rest a little more because he's fought, twice? He's fought back to twice in 3 or 4 months. So who do you think Gaethje's next opponent, and who do you think he should fight? I'm assuming it's going to be Chandler, but what's your thoughts on that?
It could also be Dariush. I think at this point, Dariush, you could put him against anyone in that division at this point after what I've seen from him. So, that might even be the most likely one for him.
Yeah, because it seems like he's kind of getting screwed because he had that big win over Ferguson last April or last May, and then he ended up losing to Khabib, and now he's been kind of quiet. So it would be interesting to see what Gaethje could do, because I think Gaethje is still a great fighter. I mean, he's ranked number 2 right now currently.
Yeah.
I think you can't sleep on Gaethje.
Great coaching as well. That gives him a huge edge.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. There was something else I was going to add, but did you want to add anything else that you saw in the fight that we failed to mention?
If I look at the card here, I think that we pretty much covered a lot of it, JJ. I would like to say that it's interesting. I want to see who Tai Vusa fights next. If we look in that division here, if we take a quick look, here it is. Yes, heavyweight. He's not even ranked. Good Lord. All right, well, I guess what I'll say is that, I think Tai Vusa deserves a top 10 contender at this point in the heavyweight division. He's shown his striking against someone who's a huge mammoth of a man who is physically intimidating and has great power, and he was able to piece him up in faster than you can think of. So I think that Tai Vusa deserves a top 10 fight at this point.
If you like I said, you just mentioned Tai Vusa. He was in the heavyweight division. I think that's the next UFC 265. I think is heavyweight if I can remember right. Mm-hmm. But do you think the fight between Francis Ngannou and John Jones will actually ever happen? Because it seems like it's going to be a while before it gets actually scheduled.
I think that Ngannou will probably have another opponent before that's even in the works. I think it will happen eventually, JJ, and I think that it's mostly because the fight fans demand it. So Dana White will hear the call, and he'll see those dollar signs in his eyes, and I think it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah, because that would probably be right now the dream matchup for a lot of UFC fans, and of course, I think a lot of UFC fans before McGregor and Poirier fought, I think a lot of people wanted to see Khabib and McGregor again. However, that's not going to happen. And I think, like I said, Francis Ngannou, John Jones, I think that's what everybody is looking forward to. But as we end the interview, and again, thanks for coming on, Kyle. It's great every time you come on, learn more about UFC, get all the news that happened recently. If you want to tell more about your podcast, you said you're going to start it back up here pretty soon. All that good stuff, pretty much.
Yep, we're going to have Tone the Boss on soon. He just got signed by a major record label, so he's got a lot of stuff to talk about. We're going to be having him on this week, and we're going to be ramping up the podcast again. I am going to start posting my weekly parlays on the podcast page soon, so stay tuned if you guys want to check those out. I'll be posting them in real time as the fights happen, because that's how I do it. So if anybody wants to check it out, go check out the Pickle Podcast on Facebook and YouTube.
All right, and also before we end the interview, you also mentioned that you finally had your first sponsor. If you want to tell more about that, stuff like that.
Yes, it's Brits Pickles. It's a company that actually brines their pickles in oak barrels. So they're fermented as well, so it really creates a unique flavor. We got contacted by them a while ago, and they're sending us a ton of products. They even have stuff like kimchi. So we're going to be diving into some interesting food choices here on the podcast. And we also have a code if anybody wants to go buy Brits Pickles or try them out. I would highly recommend it. You just have to go to Brits Fermented Foods, Brits with 2 T's. So BritsFermentedFoods.com and use the promo code Pickle Podcast.
All right, sounds great. I'll put a link in the description down below, both in the video and the audio, and of course also the whole episode that is released eventually later this week. So again, thanks for coming on, Kyle. It's been great. Again, check out the Pickle Podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Also check them out on Facebook and Instagram. Again, thanks for coming on, Kyle, and have a wonderful night.
All right, next time we have a podcast, JJ, let's do a shoey.
All All right. That sounds all right.
Okay, thanks for having me on.
All right, let's wrap up the show with our segment Questions from Instagram, where I answer 3 fan sports questions from Instagram. If you want to be part of Questions from Instagram, just type in your sports question at the STP pod store. Remember, I'll put it on every Wednesday and Friday, and most likely I will answer them and give you a shout out on the most recent episode. The first question comes from @BillyBaseball14, and he asks, What is your favorite part about the podcast? Well, it's a good question. Thank you, Billy Baseball 14. And actually, I'm sorry, @Billy_Baseball 14. And I'll probably say just the interviews. Now, I like doing the sports lightning round, figuring out other sports, what's going on in the world of sports. But I think doing the interview, just learning about more people's podcasts, just getting to know people and networking, basically, that's probably my favorite. That's probably my favorite part. Now, I do like the questions from Instagram. I like all of it, to be honest with you, but the interviews are probably my favorite. Thanks again for the question, @Billy_Baseball14. Now on to our next question. This comes from @Will Hernandez, and he asks, could you see Kawhi going to the Lakers? I don't think so. It's not Kawhi's team. I think if LeBron wasn't there, or even if Anthony Davis was there, like if LeBron wasn't there, I think he's going to the Lakers if LeBron wasn't there. However, it's LeBron is there, it wouldn't be his team. And I think Kawhi knows that, and that's why he would never go to the Lakers. I could see him going to the Warriors, but at the same time, again, it's Steph Curry's team. So I don't think he'd go to the Lakers. I think he's going to stay with the Clippers, even though he's injured and seems like he could be out for a while. And I think the Clippers are pretty determined to keep Kawhi. Again, they have Paul George there, one of his best friends. In my opinion, I think he stays with the Clippers. Now, the Heat would make a lot of sense, but he's not home, and it checks all the boxes except it's not home, similar to Dallas. But again, I think he's going to end up staying with the Clippers. Our last question, this comes from @WarriorsFanatic, and she asks, could you see a scenario where you go back to doing podcasts twice a week? Thanks for the question, @WarriorFanatic. Unfortunately, not at this time. I would love going back to 2 times a week, but I'm just so busy, and even one is hard to just a week. So, but hopefully within the near future, we can go back to doing twice a week. Now, again, this week, most likely I'll be getting another one very soon or releasing another episode. So there's just a lot involved in it. And unfortunately, I wish I could go back to twice a week, but at the moment, it's just once. All right, thanks for the question. Now, again, if you want to be part of questions from Instagram, just type in your sports question. I will answer and give you a shout out on the most recent episode. All right, thanks for watching and listening. Thanks for listening to the Sports Town Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and much more. Also, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter @SportsDown Podcast. If you want to check out more videos of the Sports Town Podcast, click on the right.